gets it off in time. And he's got it, baby! Big time Nets win!
The only Nets fans you know.
Man.
I mean, come on, man. Or are these guys?
Welcome back to the only NetsFansYouKnow podcast. I'm Peter. Welcome to a special edition of the podcast. Our special trade line edition series continues. Episode 2 of 3. Our guest today, though, pillar of Nets Twitter, a fan since New Jersey, and I guess Podthorn fame, Spaces fame. Welcome to the show, Sam, or you guys might know him as Bob Sacramento 5. And if I fucked up the name, you could correct it for me, bro. What's going on?
No, you got it. You got it perfectly. Even better than I expected. Happy to be here. Happy to talk Nets. Let's do this.
I would be remiss if I did not just jump into this. Mike Scotto put out some juicy information that a deal might have been talked about. Mikal Bridges going to Houston and getting our picks back. What's your first reaction when you hear that?
You know, I think a lot of it depends on how many picks they're getting back and if they're getting any of Houston's young pieces as well. I mean, look, I think that the big topic du jour in Nets world and Nets Twitter world specifically is, does this team go through a massive rebuild, trading Bridges, trading Cam Johnson, Claxton, etc., or do they, see if they can build around Bridges, not necessarily with Bridges as the number one pillar, but with Bridges there. To me, it depends. If you're giving us all of our picks back on top of some young talent, then I could be interested. But I think people have blown this up a little bit. I think people have made this into too much of a no-brainer than I think it actually is. I mean, you're really talking about getting 2 swaps back and 2 picks back. The swaps, who the hell knows? We don't know what's going to happen in Houston. And, the picks obviously are the picks. But look, if you're getting your picks back, then you're basically saying this team isn't going to be good. And I think that in the NBA, there's a lot of different ways to compete. It's not just blowing up. And I think that the Nets have other guys on the team that they can get picks for. So, that's not me giving an absolute direct answer, but it would really have to depend on what's there. If all the picks are coming back, if they're still all unprotected, etc.
There's definitely a fraction of Nets Twitter that's definitely a little bit younger that is not realizing what you're doing if you're getting into a rebuild. They don't understand like the loss upon loss, and they might say, "Oh man, but we're building something. It's gonna, it's okay if we lose if we have guys that we're building up." And you're going like 20-50. Saint wound up DMing Mike Scotto, and he said it was some of the picks and not all the picks. And I feel like you said, you don't know what is being talked about.
Look, I think the big thing that people don't realize is that the Nets, and it's funny that the people who I think are advocating for a rebuild the most out of Nets fans are the youngest people, because those people should understand the most that, unlike us Jersey fans who aren't used to the Nets being a destination, this team is now a place that stars have asked to go to. I mean, like, I made a list recently and I tweeted it out. The number of stars that have either asked to come here, have been linked to coming here since they moved to Brooklyn is an incredibly long list, whether it's, prime Dwight Howard, or whether it's, Jimmy Butler, or whether it was obviously KD, Kyrie, and Harden that all wanted to be here. I mean, we just saw in a Jake Fisher report even recently that clearly DeJounte Murray wants to be here. Like, this is not playing, as much as I loved, going with my dad to the Meadowlands. This is not the same setting that they used to be in. Like, they're in New York. They're in New York City. People want to be here. People want to live here. They have a world-class training facility. And as much as Nets fans, I think, like to self-hate about the state of the franchise generally, it's a place that people want to be.
I think you're absolutely right. I think you had to experience those Jersey days. You had experience going through every loss, hoping you can get John Wall to kind of like feel kind of what an atmosphere of having a perennial losing team is like. This team, don't get me wrong, this team might be the most frustrating Nets team I've ever seen in my fanhood, okay? But it's still is you still have these building blocks of good players maybe not great together, but separately are definitely, not snobs here. This team has some potential that it can grow on. But I think the issue with all of this like rebuild talk is that people are not cool with Bridges, right? He went from a finals run, coming to Brooklyn, playing heavy minutes. Then he goes to the FIBA training camp, traveling for FIBA, playing heavy minutes there. Nets training camp. I don't understand the hate for this guy when I think he's obviously hurt. He's running on fumes. And you could say, Pete, then why doesn't he take off? Because if he's out, then Cam Thomas is just going to be smothered alive because the team really doesn't have that many resources offensively. I think people really don't understand that. Am I crazy here?
No, I totally agree. I think the hate for Bridges is honestly bizarre, and it seems like it's a lot of people who, from a Nets Twitter perspective at least, it's a lot of people who still wish the team had Katie and Kyrie, and so this is kind of retribution for that trade. But, I mean, look, Bridges, I think what people need to understand, and this is similar to people at work who are switched from a low usage position to a high usage position where you're being asked to do something you're not usually asked to do. I mean, Bridges went from being the fourth or fifth option on a team. Like there were games where, Chris Paul, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, even Cam Johnson at times were used more than Bridges was. Even at times Jay Crowder was. And to go from, that where you can put all of your energy into playing defense to then being asked to be the number one playmaker and scorer and the number one option while also playing, all NBA defense. Like, no, I don't think most Nets – and look, if you were to be an all-worldly scorer and also an all-NBA defender, then you're basically talking about being prime Kawhi Leonard or Paul George. And I don't think anybody thought that Bridges was going to be that. So the fact that he's, having a really nice offensive year and a poor defensive year isn't that shocking to me because that's probably what we should have expected. The guy is like, a top 40, top 35, top 50 player in the NBA who's a number 3 option on a championship team and probably a number 2 option on a pretty good team. And he's clearly a number 1 on a bad team, which is what this Nets team is. So I don't really understand the dislike towards him. I think he's basically done what we've expected, just way more offense and way less defense, but it all averages out to me to like a pretty good player.
I really do think he's had a resurgence of late in particular. The last 11 games, I'll just, sugarcoat this. 26 points, 47% from the field, 41% from 3. I believe those are very similar to the numbers that he had when he came.
Yep.
Right? He's getting into the role, and man, did you just hit it on the head. You can't expect a player to play defense on maybe the other team's toughest player on offense, have that number 1 assignment on defense, and be the guy who's going to handle the ball on offense and be the number 1. I think that's crazy. Even when KD was here, we definitely helped him out by maybe not giving him the toughest assignment on defense on some possessions, right? It's people act as if, man, this guy's lazy. He doesn't love basketball. I've seen people say he doesn't love basketball. I've seen people say, oh, you can't sit with Jalen Brunson after the Knicks game, even though they've been friends for years, because he's not competitive. He's soft. I just think it's so ridiculous. But overall, are you disappointed with him this year?
No, I'm impressed that his offense has stayed high and that he is still performing offensively at the level that he was last year in a lot of ways, which is way, way better than any of us expected him to be when they traded for him. Like when we traded for him, we thought we were getting this 3-and-D guy that maybe had some room to get better offensively. This guy has proven that he can really score. And like we've seen him go toe-to-toe in really good games with great scorers and come out victorious. I mean, like his games in Miami were amazing. He went toe-to-toe with Trae Young and was incredible. Like he's had games with 40-something points and looked awesome. It doesn't mean that I think he's a number 1 option or honestly even a number 2 option on a title team. But, I think he's been really good. And the other thing I wanted to mention, Pete, which I think we got to mention is, and this goes for all the Nets players that we will or won't talk about today is, this is also a team that's basically played most of the season without a point guard. I mean, Dinwiddie was a shell of himself and basically hasn't been trying for the last, 25 games. And they've had Ben Simmons for 6 or 7 games. I mean, guys like Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson and Dorian Finney-Smith are used to playing with people like Chris Paul and Luka Doncic and whatnot. Like, this is not an offense that's easy to play in right now, and where people are getting easy shots because there's a coach and or a point guard that's drawing up schemes that are giving easy shots to players. So, like, I think the offense for all these guys on the team can only get better.
Oh, absolutely. And I think whether you want to believe in the Ben Simmons effect or not, I definitely do think there was a difference in the offense, and the people that are saying that was a false thing, that they said, oh, they're always this open or whatever bullshit they say. I don't believe it. I do think a true point guard opens everything up. Me and Kool-Aid have said the same exact thing, that getting a point guard has to be the thing that has to be talked about almost more than anything, particularly like a ball handling guard. You could really unlock this entire offense because, face it, Bridges can't have the ball in his hands. He could take the last shot to end the game. I have no problem with that. But as far as initiating the offense, as far as the percentage of plays or possessions, I should say, that have him bringing up the ball, he's an off-the-ball guy. You want him in the corner. He'll hit 40% from 3 in the corners. I just don't want him taking all these pull-up jump shots that he's shooting around 30% at. That's my issue with that. Anything else you want to talk about with Bridges? Because I feel like we've talked about him for a while.
No, I think we hit on all the important stuff. I mean, look, I expect him to be here after the deadline. And, look, I think the last thing that should be said is that with Bridges, there's also, the ownership perspective of this, which is, like Cy, I think, does not want this team to be terrible. They've worked hard to make this team, a place where they've made the playoffs a bunch of straight years. Cy is based off of like what I've read in the papers and whatnot, and I think Forbes did a profile. Cy has lost a lot of money recently. I don't think he wants this team to be terrible for multiple years, so that's why I think it's just unrealistic to think he's getting traded.
Maybe about the last month or so, I've had 3 different people come to me and tell me that Nick Claxton is a goner. Where do you go as far as re-signing Nick, trading Nick? Where do you fall?
So, it's funny. I've had recently, like literally like within the last 24 to 48 hours, I've had a little bit of it, not a big, but a little bit of a change of heart in that I was adamantly anti-trading Claxton. Or sorry, I was adamantly anti-re-signing Claxton, I should say that, because I don't really believe in tying up big parts of the cap with centers that aren't elite centers, because I think that if there's, especially when your GM is Sean Marks, I think if there's one thing Marks has shown, it's that he knows how to draft centers. I mean, he picked Allen late, he picked Claxton in the second round. Sharp was basically Sharp was the 29th pick, and he really showed a lot this year and really advanced. I think fans seem like they're pretty happy with Clowney, who I know is more of a power forward, but nonetheless, I think he's shown that he knows what he's doing there. And so from that perspective, I don't love tying up, 18, 20, 22 million, 23, 5, whatever you want to say. And depending on Claxton's market, it could get really high to a center, especially one like Claxton who has the deficiencies he has. The guy, his free throw shooting is barely improved, which makes him a liability at the end of the game, at the end of games. And we've now heard for 4 years that he was going to get bigger and wider and stronger, and he looks the exact same as he did, or pretty similar.
Sam, come on. He's not bigger?
I think he's pretty similar to where he was. Look, he has gotten stronger, but this is a guy who I thought was really going to fill out like big time. Like, I'm talking, like, people said originally, like, not obviously Dwight Howard-esque, but like really getting stronger and being able to handle, the Valanciunases and the Vucevic's and the Nurkic's of the world, like the thicker guys. But so with that, I was always anti-re-signing him. Having said that, this is part of why I want them to trade for a point guard at the deadline, because if they do hold on to him, it would be nice to see what does this guy do with a real point guard, because Claxton did look really good when he was playing with James Harden. And last year, I don't really consider Kyrie to be a point guard and whatnot, but we've seen moments where he looks really good, and I also think the Nets haven't always used him in the best way. So I'm conflicted, but I do think I think look, and this is a kind of a cop-out answer. I think it really depends on what's offered for him. I think if you're able to trade him like with DFS and you're getting a good young player and also picks and whatnot, I think I would say yes to that. If it looks like he's being used as just like, a higher level expiring contract, then I think you take your chances, roll into free agency, and hopefully, you give him hopefully a lot of teams don't have cap space and you get him on a good deal and you don't lose him for nothing. But I've struggled with it more of recent, as you can tell, but I would definitely still lean trading him. What about you?
So I totally disagree with you about him getting bigger, but I get what you're saying, right? You're not expecting a Dwight Howard, but you want him to fill out a little bit more. And I still think that that's possible. He's 24 years old. A lot of people think that this is the end of his development. In 4 years, he's going to be 28, which you would consider his prime, right? So
Sure.
I think we're kind of going a little ahead of ourselves with that. But with that being said, with the Nets cap situation, I think you have to trade him. It's so hard for me to find a way to keep him because, like you said, they don't use him right. I talked to some people with, that work in analytics, and they gave me a couple stuff that he did last year, right? These are his analytics and grades from B-Ball Index, okay?
Yep.
As a pick and roll man, he's 99 percentile, meaning if people don't know percentile like me, there's only 1% of players that are better than him. He's elite at that. Same thing for putbacks, transition offense, 98%. We go to defense. He's rated the best perimeter big man defending on the perimeter, I should say. 4th rim protector, 5th in defensive playmaking, and in the 98th percentile in shot blocking. I have to think there's a GM that hears and sees those numbers and is just foaming at the mouth to throw a max type deal at him.
Right.
Now, I don't know if you're afraid of an injury concern. That makes a lot of sense to me. I say all this, and man, it just comes down to it. If you could lose with this guy, you could lose without him. But man, does it hurt giving up a 24-year-old who just last year we were talking about as being snubbed for winning Defensive Player of the Year. That's where I land. If you're going to trade him, well, what do you want back? What's the deal look like?
I think if you're trading him, I think trading him just him makes it hard, because then you're really only finding a team that is thinking of either is ready to compete for a title right now or knows that they want to re-sign him. And I think that might be too small of a group. I think that
wait, I got to cut you off here. I don't think a team makes a deal unless they're going to re-sign him, right?
Yeah, I mean,
that has to.
Probably. I think you're right. I think it probably also depends on how much they're giving up. And that's why I say, like if he's in a deal with DFS, let's say him and DFS are going to OKC or Houston, then those teams, or specifically a team like OKC, who might think like, wow, we're way ahead of schedule. We actually could win the title this year. And even though we're a smaller market team and eventually have to pay, Jalen Williams and Chet and all that stuff, like we want to take a chance on Claxton, see what happens with his market, see what happens in the playoffs. We need another big. And also DFS is under contract on a great deal. We'll give up, OKC has unlimited picks. Maybe we'll trade, I don't know if Giddey would be involved or Case Wallace or, any of the other young guys that they have. But I think stacking those two guys together makes sense. It's tough because a lot of teams now, this is the issue with Claxton. There's a lot of teams now that have centers. I mean, you go around the league and like there used to be, first of all, there was a period of time where no one wanted a center. Now the league's gotten big again. I mean, you see like the Knicks are unfortunately have these massive guys that are putting up great numbers, and that's even without Mitch. And there's a lot of teams that have centers and don't need a guy like Claxton. And so that I think is the worry. And that's maybe what might make you want to re-sign him, is because if you're not going to get the proper value back, then would you rather just re-sign him and figure out a trade later?
You could do a sign and trade in the offseason, right?
Yeah, you could. I just feel like, with sign and trades, as we've seen, the team that's trading the guy usually always ends up as the loser. And I think you're more likely to get something now with teams that actually are able to trade for him, as opposed to teams that just have outright cap space for him.
Yeah, I look in the West, and obviously OKC is going to be involved in every mock trade because of all their picks. But man, just adding a Nick Claxton and Dorian Finney-Smith to one of those teams would be a huge upgrade for them. And I do think if we trade Clax, you have to get at least 2 first-round picks, right? And I do think there'll be a market for it just because how competitive the West is. Do you agree with me with that?
Yeah, I honestly, Claxton is one of those guys. Like, I feel like I'm pretty close to the ground about trade value, but Claxton is one of those guys where, like, I just don't know what teams think about him. Like, I don't know if he's viewed as kind of this more like, I don't even know the right way to describe him, as this like defense only, or if teams see massive upside with him. He's had some injury stuff here and there. And so I just don't know how teams view him like right now. I really find it hard to gauge what the market is. Cause even if you just like go around the league, it's just like a lot of these teams, have centers. It's like, even look at like a random division, like the Central Division in the East. Like, like Milwaukee's got like Brook, and Indiana's got Miles Turner, and Chicago's got Vucevic. Like, you can go. It's just, and that's just obviously a random conference. But all these, I mean, look, Orlando's got a million centers. Atlanta's got Capella and Okongwu. Like, I mean, Washington maybe could need somebody, but they're trying to trade Gaffer, and I don't even think they want to be good. So like, it's just, and they're not going to trade any picks because they want to be bad. It's just there's not a whole lot of teams that need a center. Like, look, the Raptors almost got traded for Claxton. What was it, last year? I think it was 2 years ago, the Harden deadline.
2 years ago, for one first rounder, right?
Yeah, exactly. And look, the Raptors have, like, if you look even in our division, the Raptors have Jakob Poeltl, and the Knicks have Mitch and Hartenstein, who Hartenstein's a free agent who's probably going to leave because he's going to make too much money. But like, the Celtics got Porzingis and or Horford, and the Sixers got Embiid. There's a lot of teams there's a lot of centers, and there's a lot of teams that have them, which I think is going to hurt the Claxton market, and that's what makes me nervous about it.
You make a good. I didn't think about that as far as matching a team with center to center, but man, it would be very hard for me to give up Clax with only getting like a first rounder back, or getting a protected first rounder, right? Like you said before, like, is it worth it to gamble? Would you be upset if you gambled and you lose out getting like maybe a first rounder and a second rounder for him? Would you be upset with the chance of, not re-signing him? What do you think about that?
I think it depends what type of first you're talking about. Like, if you're talking about one of OKC's, terrible picks and a second, I think that's obviously a disaster, because you just can't. The biggest thing in the NBA for me, for watching it for as long as we have now at this point, is it is, and it's unfortunate, it is an asset league, and like, you can't lose assets for nothing. And that's like a ding against Sean Marks, which he did with Dinwiddie at times, and that obviously happened with Bruce Brown and whatnot. And I think he has maximized certain guys when trading them, but like, this is a big one, man. I mean, like, you gotta, like, if you're keeping Claxton past the deadline, you better know that you're gonna re-sign him, and that he's a part of the future. Because if not, I mean, to lose as you said, I mean, you said it well, to lose a 24-year-old potential defensive candidate player of the year who you haven't even done that good of a job developing, and that's partially why his contract isn't, or why his value isn't even as high. And he goes to a team, like, let's say he goes to OKC or something like that, or a team that has cap space, and he plays with a good point guard, and he ends up looking like, this unbelievable asset. That's going to be a massive pill to swallow, and something that's really hard for the Nets to recover from.
Overall, if you had to make a prediction right now, final say?
I think Claxton's going to be here after the deadline, and I'm not sure it's a good thing, because I don't know if they'll be able to re-sign him depending on his market, but I think he will. I think he's going to be here.
I think he's gone. I think you're 100% wrong this time. But I would not be shocked.
Let's see.
I would not be shocked if you were right. All right. Now we gotta talk about the trio. Dinwiddie, Royce, Dorian Finney-Smith. We talked about Dorian Finney-Smith a little bit. He sprained his ankle, and I wrongly went out on a couple podcasts and said I thought his injury was a lot worse. My ass was kind of going into a conspiracy theory of saying, listen, if the guy just has a sprain, why even say anything? Sprains happen every day in the NBA. Obviously, it must be worse. Jay from BK has corrected me. He says he's not that hurt. It's more of the Nets kind of playing it safe. And by all means, if Dorian Finney-Smith gets hurt, it's a major disaster.
Yeah.
Major disaster, because you're at least banking on getting at least one first rounder and a second.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's got to be the lowest bar is getting a first and a second or two or something like that. I mean, he's on an awesome deal. He's a great defensive player. I mean, what he did in the Clippers series the Clippers game against Kawhi was kind of a little snippet of what he can do in the playoffs. He's played in big playoff games. He seems to be a great teammate. Like, I think that's what you got to expect. He's someone to me that has to be traded because he plays a position where the Nets have some young guys that they could put out there. And he's so important to some playoff teams that having him on this Nets roster that's obviously going nowhere and whose best case is basically being a 9 or 10 seed, it really makes no sense having DFS. Like, to me, and this might be a hotter take, to me, having DFS who has so much value past the deadline makes way less sense than keeping Royce past the deadline, because Royce, realistically, you're going to get back what, a couple of seconds in salary filler, like maybe a really late first, kind of like what we traded for him, which was like the 20-something first. But he's also got the connection with Donovan Mitchell. He's supposedly in Brooklyn. He's been an amazing teammate and can kind of be a veteran guy to the younger dudes. The opportunity cost, I guess, so I'm going to use a nerdy, econ term, the opportunity cost with Finney-Smith is so big because that dude has real value. And I just think Royce's is so much more limited. And losing out on a couple of seconds and some salary on top of the fact that Royce maybe can, be a little Donovan Mitchell whisperer possibly, to me is far less of a loss than, what you'll lose with not trading Finney-Smith.
I think you're absolutely fucking right. I don't think it's that much of a hot take because I had the same idea recently myself, thinking maybe you keep a Royce because if it is only 2 second rounders that you get back, it might be worth it just to keep him along because this guy does bring, how can I say this, a little stabilization to the locker room. He does a lot of things that Jock Vaughn loves. And man, there are a couple of times when he's played against some centers and he's done pretty well, considering that he's not a big man, right? This team that likes to play small ball, maybe you keep a Royce. If his value is just seconds, I have to take a deeper look at that.
Whether you want the Nets to rebuild or whether you want them to get a star, DFS is the guy that's got to be moved, because if you want to rebuild, Claxton can be a part of that. If you want to win now, Claxton can be a part of that. If you want to, either way, the Claxton thing, you can tie a bunch of different ways. DFS, if you want to win now, he's not so good that you need to have him on the team, but also he can give you picks. Let's say the Nets get, as you mentioned, 2 firsts for DFS or 1 first in 3 seconds. That's something that can be used, to get a DeJounte Murray, or it can be used later for another impact player if you're trying to win. On top of the fact that if they're trying to rebuild, obviously having him makes no sense. He's the guy where it would be malpractice if the only guys that are traded at the deadline are Royce and Dinwiddie, who Dinwiddie, I think it's hard to know what his value is at this point, which I know is the last guy, because he hasn't been trying, in my opinion, for about 25 games. And I think it's really, I find it personally upsetting as someone who's always rooted for him and liked him, the way he's handled the fact that he hasn't been traded yet and has basically quit. And so I don't even know what his value is. I assume it's basically going to be salary filler in a second or two.
I'm a big Spencer Dinwiddie guy. He's my favorite player. I always say that he met my dad and he wound up talking to me for a little bit. So I had a little bit of a personal connection, quote unquote. But I look at the numbers and I had to ask myself this year, like, what is going on? And I've been talking to people about that. Uh, I could say it now because it's talked about. You're 100% right. He was, he is having a quote unquote mutiny or sandbagging or whatever. From what I could talk about, he was promised a deal at the beginning of the year, and obviously that did not happen. Ben went down. They had to use him at point guard. He got offered a 1 year and 2 year deal from the Nets, and apparently it was very low money, and he took that as a slap in the face.
Yep.
You know what I mean? He took it as a slap in the face, and this is kind of a personal thing between him and Marks. I don't think he hates the Nets. I know he doesn't hate the Nets, and I know for a fact he doesn't hate Brooklyn. He was so happy coming back. How did we get here?
It's funny. I will say that I made some bets and I won some bets on Dinwiddie's performance against the Lakers because I was like, this guy's from here. I
He's
know
a Laker fan.
Yep. I know he wants to play for them. And then obviously Shams had a report this week. The Lakers have been looking at him because all of his numbers have become so low on the betting websites. And I was like, this guy's going to come out and perform. And it's funny the way that works.
Yeah, and like you mentioned with Dorian Finney-Smith, if the Nets are going to make a deal for a Murray, Dinwiddie has to be part of it as well. I would at least assume. Uh, I don't know if people are happy getting Murray. Some people want D'Lo. That was also mentioned. But whatever it may be, Spence is heading out. I do believe he has more value than maybe like a second rounder. I do think at the very least a $20 million expiring contract has some value. How do you feel about a D'Lo? How do you feel about a Murray?
I have no interest in getting D'Lo. I think that he's having a good year of late. I've never been a big fan of his. I don't think he really plays winning basketball. I know that his numbers this year are pretty good, but I'm just not a fan of. I wasn't really a fan of him when he was here at the first time, even though he obviously played really well. And Murray I like a lot. Murray to me is someone that I think when he's not playing with Trae Young has proven that he's still a really good, close to all-star level, if obviously a little bit below that player. I think people are digging up numbers on him and how he looks in Atlanta to try to say that he's not the same guy. You don't stop like he hasn't had some massive injury. You don't stop becoming an all-NBA defender. I think we've heard other players like Kevin Herter was on a podcast last year saying that playing with Trae is just not easy. And I don't think it's surprising that a lot of the guys in Atlanta, specifically the guards, have not really flourished playing with, or even the forwards have not really flourished playing with Trae. And I think you get DeJounte with the Nets, and I think he explodes. And I think at worst case, he increases his value to what it is right now. I mean, this was a guy that was traded for 3 unprotected picks and a swap, and now they're talking about an expiring and 2 picks, or maybe an expiring and a pick and change. Like I don't know. I think his value is dropped to a point where I think the Nets would be smart to pounce on him.
Man, do I agree with you. Bridges off the ball. That's the key. Murray would be a guy who's perfect for this team. Right age. Contract is not bad. Who just so happens to fits in with your timeline perfectly. Why have the Nets not made this deal if it's true that if a Spencer Dinwiddie and maybe 2 picks from OKC that you would get, I should say, preface this. This is what I would do, okay? I've said this before. Excuse me, guys, if you heard this. Dorian Finney-Smith, OKC, get a first rounder, 2 seconds. I'm giving OKC more leverage to be fair in the deal, okay?
Sure.
I take that OKC pick and I give up maybe our Philly pick, right?
Yep.
Send that to Atlanta with Spence. We get a Murray. If it's that simple, why not? Why hasn't Marks done this? What do you think? I don't think he's down for this.
That's what I agree. I mean, look, they liked him in the draft, and his contract.
Yeah.
I mean, everything you said about Murray was totally correct, and I agree with. I think the one thing you missed is that he's also he just signed this extension that I thought was stupid of him to sign, where he's only being paid like $30 million a year, when like a lot of his guys who are at a similar level are getting, in some cases, not double, but like 50% more than that. And so I agree with you. I think that this is a deal that if they wanted him, it's clear they could have him. I don't know if they're waiting until, maybe they're trying to see if they really do need to give up that last pick or get that last pick. But I don't know. I don't know, man. I agree with you. It just seems too obvious that if you want to keep your stash of picks while also getting better, the move would obviously be to trade DFS, use those picks from DFS to use for Murray. And so you're basically in the same exact spot you were in before, like a month ago. You just now have your point guard of the future who's better than DFS, and you have the same number of picks that you had before. Basically, I don't really get it. I'm with you. I think it's like, to me, we talk. Neither of us are mathematicians. That seems pretty basic to me.
Yeah, next year he's making 25 mil. Year after that, 27, 29. He doesn't even hit 30 million until the last year of the deal, which is a player option, which I would assume at this time he'd probably opt out if the new CBA or whatever cap is truly expanding and truly, out of this world by then. I would assume that he would opt out. So basically, you're looking at under $30 million for a starting point guard. This is a point guard league, okay? This is a point guard league. We don't have a point guard in a point guard league.
Yep.
This guy is a point guard. This guy could get it done. I wish I had this in front of me. His numbers when Trae Young is not playing are so much better than when he plays with Trae Young.
Oh yeah, it's night and day.
Right? Yeah, I would feel no issue of him taking the keys to the franchise. Like I said, maybe you said it, 27 years old, perfect timeline. I just don't understand it. I really don't.
And look, and this is the last thing I'll say about the DeJounte thing, because I think me and you both feel strongly about it.
Yeah.
All right. Let's say that they have DeJounte and Bridges under contract for the next 2 years combined at about $50-something million, right? Which is like for having two players of that caliber, a really small number. And let's say some of these, Marks has hit on some of these like later first round picks that they've had and or a second here and there, and Clowney might become something. I still have faith in Whitehead once he comes out of this injury. Why wouldn't a superstar say, okay, they already have Bridges, they already have Murray, they already have some other pieces. I can come to a massive market and work it from there. Like, to me, like then you're on the road. I think what gets mixed up in a lot of this is people think that when we ask for Murray or someone of that level, that we're saying, oh, like people are like, well, they're not needle movers. It's like, no. Like none of us think that DeJounte is a top 20 player in the league. He's not. And I don't think Bridges is a top 20 player in the league. But if you have a couple of players at that level, kind of like, what the Bucks had with Middleton and Drew, or even what the Celtics have right now, where they have a lot of players at that level, kind of like the Drew Holiday, Derek White, Porzingis, whatever. If you get one really great guy, now your team becomes really dangerous, on top of still having, other assets to deal with.
If they go and tell us next Thursday at the trade deadline, after they make no moves or just sell off a couple pieces and don't get a point guard, if they say getting back Ben Simmons is our fucking trade deadline move, I'm going to lose it. I'm going to go fucking crazy. I'm going to throw my phone out the window.
Look, I mean, I have said...
Is that going to be an excuse?
So this is what I'll say. I don't think it's going to be an excuse because he's supposed to play tomorrow. I know we're recording this on a Friday. He's supposed to play tomorrow against Philly, but he's already gotten hurt. I think the team knows what his deal is. He's clearly an expiring for next year. And they've definitely, I'm assuming, have tried to trade him, and I'm sure it obviously has come to no avail. This is what I'll say, and I've said this on Twitter. I've said this in the spaces, and I'll say it here. I've been more patient with Sean Marks than most Nets fans have. I think a lot of Nets fans put a lot more blame on him than I think is actually deserved. I think there's stuff that goes to ownership. I think there's a lot of stuff that has to do, and more stuff that has to do with player moves that happened and just bad luck, whether it's injuries, whether it's vaccine mandates, whatever you want to say. What I will say is, if they have a quiet deadline this year, I will be apoplectic. That to me is like there's no going back from. Like, this is it. You went into the season wanting to see what you had, thought that maybe you could be a 6, 7, 8 seed, whatever. You just made 3 franchise-altering trades in the span of 18 months. You wanted to like kind of take a deep breath and just see what you have. Okay, you see what you have and you see that it's not that good. You have expiring contracts. You have players that have value to other teams that can actually compete. This is it. You got to trade now. Like you can't basing anything off of Ben Simmons is like one of the stupidest things I've ever heard. I personally think that every decision that the Nets should make should be made as if Ben is not on the roster. He's you have this guy has played 45 games or whatever it is in 2 full years of basketball. I mean, this guy's averaging playing a fourth of a season every year. Like, you have to assume he's not on the team. He's a big chunk of your salary cap that eventually will go away, and he's a big expiring that will be expiring in about 2.5 months when the season ends. Like, that's how you got to treat him. The dude doesn't play. There's nothing else to say about it.
I'm going to throw you a curveball now. Lonnie Walker, you get offered a first and a second from him. What do you do?
I would do it in a heartbeat. I wouldn't even think twice.
I have to agree. He's still young. I would not mind giving him the mid-level exception, but if a first rounder comes my way, I think I have to take it. What is your ideal scenario? You were the GM. You made the trades. What would you do?
I think my ideal deadline would be Finney Smith is traded to a team where they're able to get 2 firsts for him, or whether one of them is highly protected, whatever it is, 2 firsts. They flip at least one, if not both of those 2 firsts to get and Dinwiddie to get DeJounte Murray, so they're in the same spot pick wise, just with Murray. They trade Dinwiddie for a couple of seconds and salary filler as well. And I would hope that they also trade. I would say they trade Claxton, because they would then need to, if they don't want to hit the luxury tax, they trade Claxton for maybe like a first round pick and a decent like impact-ish young player. And I would say that I would be happy with Royce actually staying, because I think he's a good part of the Nets, and I think he probably could help with some Mitchell stuff. And I would hope that Lonnie Walker could also be traded. So I would do a pretty big liquidation, and plus, but then adding DeJounte.
All right, we're going to start wrapping things up. I ask all my guests this question: what is your favorite Nets jersey? You have to pick one Nets jersey. Maybe even this, you could say a throwback that they would have to bring next year to use. Which one would you use?
I would do my first ever Nets jersey, which was the alternate tan goldish New Jersey Nets one that I had a Jason Kidd version of.
What was that? Say that again. What?
It was like a tannish. It was their alternate jersey. Yeah, it was like. Or I don't even. There was a little bit of red. There was a little bit of brown. I don't even know. Maybe I'm a little colorblind. But that was my favorite Nets jersey.
What's it say across the chest?
I believe it's in New Jersey. I'm trying to think right now. Let's see.
Is that the gray one? You mean?
Yeah, no, it is gray. I don't know why I'm looking. I don't know why I remembered it as tan. You're right. It's gray.
Yeah, I actually got that jersey with J Kidd on it. Yep. I love that jersey. That's great
my
jersey.
favorite. That's my favorite Nets jersey ever.
Oh, I was just about to ask you what's your favorite Nets jersey and what's the best Nets jersey. The best Nets jersey, there's only one answer: the Dr. J jerseys. And anyone that answers differently is 100% wrong.
I have to
say,
I love that jersey also, and I strongly considered when they brought it back and they did one with Bridges, that was the jersey I considered getting a lot. I love that jersey.
They need to have that every year, and the fact that they don't is a total travesty. But that's just my
I agree with you.
Where are the Nets going to finish at the end of the year? Do they make the playoffs? No playoffs?
I think that they get the 10 seed and win about 33, 34, 32 games.
All right, Sam, let's get some plugs in there for you.
Yes, sir. Yep. Follow me on Twitter Bob Sacramento 5. If you guys don't know, that's Bob Sacramento _5. Always talking Nets, talking Mets. A lot of it is negative because, the state of the franchises that I root for are not great, including the football giants as well. But Pete, love talking to you. You host a great podcast. I think it's awesome that you get on, actually, true blue Nets fans and not just, writers or people who come and go. I've really enjoyed this. And everyone should subscribe to your pod as well.
Okay, last question. I should have said this before. Are you pro Swamp Dragon or not?
No, I'm anti. I think
it's
wrong.
I
find it to be gimmicky. I'm not about that.
I liked you right until now. I have to burn the podcast. This is horrible. You're the first anti-Swamp Dragon guest. Not happy about that, but you're a good guy, so I guess I'll let it slide. And all the Swamp Dragon Twitter fans are going to get at you now for that.
Let them have it.
You can follow me at NetsFansYouKnow on Twitter, on YouTube. I've had a lot of support lately. Thank you guys so much. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Mondays, I do a little live stream called Fireside Nets with my guy, Spen Harris. We talk Nets, go over games and whatnot, rumors. Have a great day. Have a great night. Whatever you guys are doing, let's brace up for the trade deadline and let's go Nets. We're out.